Paul, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. I've been really excited about today's conversation, and a lot of the listeners have as well. I put out a bit of a feeler on social media, and everyone was pretty keen to get your insight into a number of things. So a big thanks for joining me, mate.
Pleasure. It's good to be here.
Mate, I wanted to get stuck straight into it and hit you with a hard-hitting question straight up. So far in your career as a coach in particular, what's been the most memorable moment of your career so far, and why?
Yeah, winning the grand final obviously was huge, but probably, I mean, that's the obvious one, but probably the lead up and some of the games you remember. One of the best games was when we beat Port in a final in 2003, so it was sort of 2 years before we won the grand final, and yeah, we had a couple of players injured prior to going to that finals campaign. We had a few injured during the game, and so they're probably the games you really remember, the ones in adversity where you sort of, Port were on top. I think they were 3 games clear on top of the ladder at the end of the season. We finished 4th and we beat them, which was amazing, got into the prelim final. So that was really memorable game and probably set up a lot of what we did in 2005. But the grand final, I mean, it's just incredible, the memory of winning it, and the fans and the ex-players and families, and it was just incredible.
Obviously, in regards to success in any field or any part of life, it typically comes with a lot of failures beforehand, or almost like a low point, or a good saying or something that comes up a lot lately is that the more times you fail, the more likely it is that you'll succeed. Was there any point in your coaching career where it just felt like it was almost the lowest of the lows, or something that really sticks out to that then escalated things to start pushing you in the right projection moving forward?
It's probably 2 games that I remember. My first year we were 1-3, so we'd won 1 game, lost 3. I remember coming down at 3/4 time. We were playing Melbourne, ironically. We were 20 points down. We had one on the bench that could play. And then the following 2 weeks, I remember we were playing Brisbane and Collingwood, who'd played in the grand final the week before. So I sort of thought, gee, well, I'm going to be 1-6 in my first year as coach, and probably going to get the sack in about 3 weeks' time. So it was in those moments, and I remember going out talking to the players and just trying to reinforce the things that we do really well and we're not doing well. And we kicked 10 goals in the last quarter, and we went on and beat Melbourne easily. Then we beat Brisbane and Collingwood the next 2 weeks, and as I said, we played in the prelim final that year. The second one was probably against the West Coast Eagles, and around about 5 or 6 in 2005. And I just felt the players had stopped playing for each other, and we got beaten really convincingly. And there's sort of a case of where do we really want to go as a footy club? We've just, everyone was trying to do their own thing, not playing for the team, playing for themselves. And so I sort of gave the players a bit of a spray after the game and sort of basically said, look, I think I'm wasting my time. We're not really going anywhere. If you want me to leave, I'll leave, because it was sort of more time for them to make a commitment to each other. And so they're probably the two times where sort of out of adversity we were able to turn things around. And I think the players learning as well. That first one was, they were a good team. They were able to beat Melbourne and then beat Brisbane and beat Collingwood. So that was probably the first part of getting them confident and us confident as a group, coaches, players together. The second one was more around, well, if you don't want to do it, like it takes energy to be good, and it takes a lot of energy to be great. But if you don't want to do it, then that's fine. That's your decision, and
you've got to make that decision.
You got to make that decision at some point. So they're probably the 2 that stand out.
Obviously, in football and in any sport, there's the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. Throughout your career as like player and coach, how did you deal with both the highs and the lows? So were you someone that really stayed level regardless of whether it was a big win or a bad loss, or were you someone that kind of got up and about once, and encouraged the players to get up and about on a big win and take the losses really seriously? How did you approach that?
Yeah, probably slightly different as a player and a coach. I mean, as a player, you naturally celebrate the wins, which is really good. As a coach, you've got to allow your players to do it. But probably the preparation is the main thing. As a player, you've got to prepare yourself individually to play well first. That's the biggest difference. As a coach, you're preparing the whole team.
Yep.
But preparation for both is the key. But no matter whether you're the most selfless player, you still look after yourself first and foremost. So as a player, as a captain of Fitzroy, my first obligation was to myself because I had to turn up the best version of me to be able to play well. As a coach, you never really were thinking about yourself at all. Mm-hmm. You just were thinking about the team and how you can prepare the team sort of thing. So, but I guess the common denominator was more around preparation. All you can do is control that. Some weeks I'd prepare really well as a player and I just didn't play well. Mm-hmm. But if I knew I'd done something that probably affected that performance, I could always go back to that and say, I didn't eat as well this week, or I didn't train as hard this week. Yeah. So as long as you're honest with your preparation, I think that's the main thing, and trying to control what you can control. Yeah. I think that's the big thing about highs and lows, whether it's in business or whether it's in sport. Understand what you can control and control it. And sometimes you're just going to have a really bad day. That's just the reality of life. But get back to what you do really well, prepare really well, and do that to the best of your ability.
As a coach, looking in the group of players, when there was a bad game, or maybe there was a specific player that had a bad game, with the absolute superstars, was there a trend that you noticed in regards to how they responded to such a bad game? If you've got someone who's smashing it throughout the season and they come out and just have an absolute stinker, did they go about it in a certain way, like take full responsibility? Did they go back and do a bit more tape, watch more tape, or spend a bit more time at training? Was there anything that you noticed of the guys that really stood out to you?
I think the common theme with the great players is just the drive, the inner drive that they have, in the competitiveness, the self-worth, their confidence, which then allows them to do things that they know is going to help them get better. The ones that are probably a bit more wishy-washy just don't really understand about themselves, don't really understand about the game, don't really want to put in the hard work. So the common theme when players were out of form is, I think as a coach, you first thing I would do is show them a game they played really well. So just reinforce
positive
that belief in themselves. But a lot of times it was just they would just start to train a little bit harder. They'd prepare a little bit better. But they always had that competitive edge. The one common theme about great players is the competitive nature. So you really were just trying to help them get through that period, make sure that things were going okay at home, make sure they remain really confident, and then they would typically be able to work their way through themselves.
Speaking of great players, do you think leadership as a quality is something that I guess you're born with, or can it be taught? So can you have a great player that comes in who has never really been that type of leader or vocal leader that can be taught those skills and really adopt it and start to see the benefit of that? Or do you think it's something that you're just born with, you've got to have it naturally?
Probably the competitiveness and some of the traits of a leader are relatively natural, but I definitely think you can develop it, because probably one of the confusing things around leadership is, what is it? Leadership is first and foremost being a really good role model. So if you're talking about leadership in that sense, everyone can be a good role model. So then, okay, if I'm a good role model, everyone looks at me, sees what I do really well, and emulates me. So everyone can learn how to do that. Learn what it takes to be great. The second, parts of it are, you've got to build great empathy, got to build really good relationships. I've got to be able to communicate really well. I've got to set clear standards. So they're probably the learned things as well. As a young player, I was just watching the great leaders and then learning what to do myself. But then as I gradually gained the skill set, you were the one that was sort of creating the environment, building relationships with players, helping them when they're going through bad patches. So it's really a combination. But anyone out there can certainly develop leadership capability.
Did you find it harder or easier to be a leader as a player compared to a coach? As a coach, obviously, there's only so much you can do while the game's being played. To be a leader when you're sitting up in the box, obviously, aside from the breaks. But, did you find that difficult to play that leadership role when you don't have the control to be out there with the boys?
Yeah, 100%. As a leader, when you're a player, you can do an act that helps the team. You know, it's really hard to do that as a coach. So they're really different skill sets. I think that's why often great players don't make great coaches, because they see it as just, well, as a great player, I can be a great coach. But they're really dramatically different skill sets. So, as a player, it was easier because you could have direct impact on the game. As a coach, it was more around preparation, understanding, planning, as I said, relationships, understanding the concept of leadership, empowerment, bringing players together sort of thing. And, it was more frustrating because you sat in the box and you sort of knew what it looked like and, it didn't always go to plan.
Yeah. How did you go with, I guess, treating certain players in a way that they respond best to? Was that something that was difficult to learn as you were a coach, in terms of, you might have one guy, you can give him an absolute spray and he goes out and turns it on, whereas the other guy goes into his shell once he gets confronted? Was that something difficult to figure out from player to player?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the keys to leadership, there's no doubt, because everyone responds to different conversations and different ways of learning. We do a lot of profiling now at my leadership company, Performance by Design, and really it's designed for that, to say to the leaders, you can't lead everyone the same way. You can set the same standards, but then how you get the people to adhere to those standards is going to be different. You and I might need to go and have a coffee. Mary just wants really direct feedback. Just tell me I should have been on work on time, and tell me if it happens again. I'm not going to tolerate it. So that's the key to leadership, is really understanding that. So that definitely a learned skill. I remember a really critical part of my leadership journey was when I was finishing as a player, and I was a pretty good player. Always getting a game and always sort of in the leadership group or captain or whatever. And then all of a sudden at the end of 1998. I was sitting on the bench a lot, and that was before they used the interchange really for coming in and off the ground. And then I started to realise, geez, not everyone gets a game every week. Not everyone's going through the same thing that I'm going. So it was a really good 10-week period for me to say, geez, there's a lot of different personalities and a lot of different things that people are going through. So I really learnt that specifically through that period, and then transferred that into my coaching style.
When we talk about leaders, say in the workplace, in the corporate world and stuff like that, obviously with Leadership by Design, do you find it a bit more difficult for, let's say a CEO of a company who is obviously the leader of that company, to be able to lead everyone else and to be able to make sure everyone else is okay at the same time as still playing their role as well?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the concepts get a bit blurred in the corporate world, because they take the titles. And I always talk about transactional leaders or, relationship building leaders. Most people in a business, and even in footy clubs, we see get promoted based on their technical skills. So we very rarely go into a leadership group, exec team, GM team that aren't technically really good at what they do.
Yeah.
But they haven't been taught basically, so they go up the org chart because they're very good IT person, very good marketing person, very good accountant. Suddenly they get into the leadership team and they're now managing 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people. Yeah. But they haven't been taught those leadership capabilities. So when you ask that question, the good CEOs we work with have a really good balance. They have a really good balance of getting really technical and understanding that, but more importantly, they're now overseeing the business. So they're more about what is our culture, what are our standards, what are our relationships, and they're really, really good at that. But it is definitely a balancing act. Yeah,
because it's almost like, particularly in the last, say, 18 months, it's interesting to see how people respond and deal with stress and the unknown, which I would imagine in that type of scenario where someone is extremely good at what they do, but all of a sudden they've been focusing on themselves or whatever the company work is, and then all of a sudden they've got all these other people they're managing. It would be interesting to see like how people respond to that stress, because it can be a massive stress all of a sudden, like finding it super hard to focus on your job. I know last year and even this year, like a lot of people found it super hard just to be productive with what they would usually do because of all the external stress that was constantly kind of taking their attention away.
Yeah, and then we talk about under pressure, do you do what's best for yourself or do you do what's best for your team, which is exactly what you're talking about. And good leaders have the capacity under pressure to do what's best for the team. Pick up the phone, make some phone calls, get on the Zoom calls, but before they start getting into the business, we're just going to do a bit of a gratitude. What are you thankful for? Is everyone okay? So really good leaders have the capacity. Poor leaders just think about themselves. We've seen a lot of that in the last 18 months. A lot of leaders that just don't really care about anyone else other than themselves. And then they just go back and am I getting paid? Will I win the election? All those sorts of things are coming to the fore. And the really poor leaders have just been incredibly exposed within that 18-month period because, as I said, under pressure, they're just doing what's best for themselves and they don't really give a crap about anyone else.
With the players that you worked with as a coach, was there anyone that stands out to you that just naturally just had, in terms of an all-round leadership role, that was just an absolute jet right from the start, that it was just really thrived off making sure that they brought up their teammates but at the same time performing on the field?
Yeah, we sort of took a leap of faith. So at the end of 2002, Paul Kelly retired as captain, and South Melbourne, Sydney, like all clubs, had great captains, and they were normally great players. And all of a sudden we had this exodus of Tony Lockett, Andrew Dunkley, Wayne Swash retired, Paul Kelly. And so we had this situation when I took over as coach in 2003 that we didn't really know who was going to be captain. So we embarked on setting up our culture code, what we're going to stand for. Then the players voted for the leadership group. So it was the first time that it ever happened in AFL history based on the behaviours. Through that process, Stewie Maxfield became captain, and he was exceptional. He really, really was committed to making us a great team, committed to being a role model leader, saying, well, if this is the behaviours we've talked about, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive my team to do that, and he was relentless. Like he's as good a leader as I've worked with, and was still able to maintain his high standards of playing. Unfortunately, got injured started 2005 and didn't play in the grand final, which was really sad. The only bad thing about winning the premiership was Stewie wasn't there, but he drove the team for 2 years, and he was an amazing leader.
Going back to what you just touched on in regards to picking that leadership group, it was funnily enough, a couple of hours ago, I went for a bit of a run with Jules Lund, and I mentioned that I was catching up with you today, and he asked me to talk to you about, he said at one time you guys were talking about how working in a club, how you would pick that leadership role and how you would go over. He said you're just extremely good at breaking down what leadership is and then almost reverse engineering how to figure out who should be the captain. He used the example of, I think it was at Sydney, asking the players group what values they saw in a leader, listing them, then asking the players group who in that group had those values, and then really breaking it down to the point where it's not that hard to figure out who should be the leader of the group. So is there a specific process that you follow to really break it down as simple as possible?
Yeah, it's really about, the more people within your organisation, even if you're talking about a corporation, but you talk about a footy club, we would get all the players in, all the coaches in, and we'd start to define what we wanted to be seen. Too often you come into a footy club or an organisation. I remember when I worked in the Melbourne Footy Club, and there was that many bloody things on the wall, and I basically said, just pull everything down. I want you to pull everything down. We left up, obviously, the cups and the trophies and the photos were fantastic because that's the history of the footy club. But determination and this and whatever it was, it has to be created by the people that are there. So we did it in end of 2002, 2003 at Coffs Harbour. We got all the players together, coaches. We came up with our trademark, our culture code, and as Jules said,
when you say culture code for the listeners, you want to break
how we're going to act, how we're going to behave, and then we said to the players, okay, if this is the way we want to behave, who in this group does that better than anyone right now, right here, right now?
Yeah.
And then out of that, there was about 9 or 10 leaders, and out of that, Stewie Maxfield became. So it's, I talk about it taking the chance out of culture. You can leave your culture to chance, and generally, if you hire good people, you're going to have a good culture. But all of a sudden, 1 or 2 people sneak through. Water cooler talk says, Roosie's an idiot, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly we talk about the weight of numbers. You've got a small company of 20, 15 good people, 5 that are trying to fit in. Then you expand it to 30. Suddenly you got 22 and 8. Then you expand it to 40. Then you got 25 and 15. You can see how it works. And suddenly 100, you got 50-50.
Yeah.
But so you can leave it to chance, or you can build your culture code, and that's what we do at Performance by Design. We come in and we sit with you, and we develop your behaviours. Most companies have a purpose and values, which is fantastic, really important. But honesty to you might look completely different to me. DK, why didn't you tell me last week that the gym session was starting at 6? And you might genuinely believe, well, Rosie, I didn't think you wanted to come, but DK asked you what time it started. No, but I thought you were working. That's why I didn't tell you it would start at 6. If tell the truth is what we stand for, and I say, DK, what time does the session start tomorrow morning? 6 o'clock, Roosie. Pretty simple to
simple
determine
stuff,
whether I've told the truth or not. But honesty's a slightly different. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so we try
100%.
and really break it down underneath the values. What are the behaviours that underpin honesty or passion or driven or supportive or whatever? And once you do that, amazing things happen. Yeah, because you reward based on it, you challenge, and that was really the Sydney model, the Melbourne model, the Geelong model was here's what we stand for. And you can act your way in because we're clear on what the system looks like. We're clear on the way we behave. So, you can absolutely create your culture or you can leave it to chance.
You see often on movies, like sporting movies and stuff like that, a new coach comes in and the players group don't want a bar of it or they're just fresh and no one really knows what to expect. And you see a varying different ways of behaviour or how the coach tries to get the players group to buy in. When you were starting at a club, whether it be Sydney or Melbourne, is there a certain, even with leadership by design now, is there a certain formula that you like to use when it's the first day you walk in, you meet all the players group or you meet whoever you're working with to try and get that attention and also be able to have the positive influence on whoever you're working with at the time?
Yeah, probably touch on Melbourne because at Sydney I was a player there, so they already sort of knew me, so I already established relationships. So if we fast forward to Melbourne, I remember the first conversation that I had with the player group that a couple of things really stood out for me. We're in this together, this is coaches and players together. We'll build this footy club collectively and every one of you will know exactly what's expected of you all the time. And when you're out in the field, you'll know exactly what those roles are and what your roles are. And then you build from there. So I brought some coaches from Sydney and I said to those coaches, look, we need to build some strong relationships here. These players are wounded, have lost for 6 years, they're lacking confidence. Let's really use the first 3 months to build those relationships, the first 3 months to build out our leadership capabilities, what our culture code, what our trademark looks like, and then we start to implement our game plan. So you've got to formulate your plan, and you've got to articulate to the players, and they've got to believe that they're doing it collectively. We're all doing it together. So that's probably the main 3 or 4 points that I tried to start at Melbourne. Yeah. And then build out from there. Yeah, nice. And earlier in the chat you mentioned touched on family. Obviously you were coaching, also had the family at the same time. I mean, I think about working, having a girlfriend and a puppy, and it's overwhelming at times. I can't imagine being the head coach of an AFL team, having a family and all the public's eyes on you as well. So was that a bit of a learning curve, and was there anything in particular that you found helpful, or did you completely try and separate the two, try and leave work at work and be with your family when you're at home? Was that quite difficult? Probably a couple of things was that we made a collective decision to do it. Now, the boys were pretty young at the time, but we did discuss it. I discussed it with Tammy, my wife, and I said, look, we will be coaching the Sydney Swans. And I think too often, it's probably the opposite. I think too often people talk about work-life balance. I just talk about life balance. Yeah. You got a dog. Whether you're in the gym, you still got a dog. The dog does not disappear when your girlfriend doesn't disappear. When you're at work. So this notion of work-life balance, to me, it's life balance. Yeah. So how do we get our life in balance? And the best way to do that is actually, when the opportunity arises, we bring them both together. We don't try and keep them separate, because if we try and keep them separate, it just becomes way too complicated. Yeah. So for me, it was, Tammy, this is what we're going to do. Are you interested? The boys were sort of pretty young, and I was like, oh, Dad, we'll never see you, and blah, 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 blah. But the interesting thing was, when I decided to give it away at Sydney, the boys were like, oh, Dad, why are you giving it away? We love the footy club. Because we took the opportunity to create an environment where players felt comfortable, wives felt comfortable, kids felt comfortable. Yeah. That was their footy club. So they're probably the main things. Now, different jobs, clearly one of the things the boys wanted to do was come in the coach's box. Clearly it's like, boys, you're not coming in the coach's box. If you're the CEO of BHP, I couldn't imagine bringing your 3-month-old or your 12-month-old baby into the board meeting. Sort of thing. So clearly there's differences, and I'm not suggesting that. But within the parameters, I think too often we separate them and we look to the end-of-year holiday for a month where we go overseas, and that's not what the kids remember necessarily. And Dylan talked about it a lot. He says he remembers me flying back from Perth on a midnight flight, arriving at 6 a.m. and then coaching his footy team. He remembers, and Tyler remember me taking him a breakfast every Thursday at Wallara, for an hour, then dropping off at school and then going to work. They're the times, and I think we forget that.
Yeah.
We always think it's the big moment. It's not the big moment. It's the little moment.
Consistent little moments.
Reading the book in bed.
Yeah.
Taking for a walk down the park taking the dog with your wife down the park, or coffee or whatever. They're the moments everyone remembers. So I think we've got to pull it together a bit more, and we've got to talk about life balance and just trying to get that right as much as we can.
Was that something that you, obviously it's a player's choice how they separate their family or personal life and football, but was that something that you're trying to relay on to the team as well, to try and embrace the fact that it is a life balance and that there shouldn't be kind of two separate things?
I remember, I even go back to my manager who was with me for years, Damien Smith. I remember when he talked about, you have to be happy at home to be a good player. And I was sort of like, actually that makes sense. If we're not happy at home, it's hard for us to be a good footballer. If we're not happy at football, it's hard for us to be a good husband or partner. So that really stuck with me. So we were about the whole person, and we believed that the whole person, the better that our players were off field, the better they would play on field. So it really was more of a common sense approach. Now, there was a couple of times where you sense the players take advantage of it, and I've got to look after the kids. Can I miss training tomorrow? Yeah. Hang on, there's a few things. There's a few things we need you to do. It's not open slather here, and even for me, like I said before about the coach's box. But even now, I was walking through the house the other day looking at some photos, and there was the boys, on the shoulders after the game singing the theme song. Now, that doesn't affect anyone, but what a memory for them to come in. We're in a circle. The boys are there singing the song. So they're the special moments that you remember. So I think I would just encourage everyone to try and create a really, really positive environment for everyone at work. And whatever that workspace is, what that looks like for you, it's going to be better for them. If they're much better at home, much better at work, then your life will be better as well as a CEO, as a manager, because they're going to be happier and you're going to be happier. Yeah,
for sure. Obviously, your wife, Tammy, she's a bit of a jet when it comes to the meditation, mindfulness side of things. Dylan's doing some incredible work as well. I don't personally know Tyler that well, but is the mindfulness side of things something that you've always had in your toolkit from earlier days, or is it something you adopted later on and even now? Is it part of your daily practice, or is it just something that Tammy enjoys and you kind of just kick off to the side?
No, we did a course together like 20 years ago or something like that. So we actually did the course together, which was amazing. She went on and did the studies. She got a PhD and all that sort of stuff, and did a dissertation in meditation. So she's way more advanced than me. But no, I meditate every morning.
Yep. And
even as a player, when I finished playing, I sort of started to think, there's minimal gains. I was talking to one of the North boys about it today. And I said, look, if you go back to when I was running, at Fitzroy, we used to do a 4K time trial. Our best runners were running 13:45, 12:45 to 13:45. So that hasn't really advanced much. I would back a lot of our Fitzroy players then to run better than most players today. But where was the improvement going to come? Probably through the mindfulness, the meditation above the shoulders. So we started to bring that in at Sydney. Tammy came into the Swans in 2003. And just, it was optional. But it was no surprise that some of our better players took it up. Brett Kerr, Craig Bolton, Jude Bolton, Adam Goods. And then we brought in full-time at Melbourne when I went to Melbourne Footy Club. So it's just sort of common sense. We work so much on our physical body, whether it be eating or, exercise, running, but we don't work enough on our mind and being present and clearing our mind and giving it a rest and all those sorts of things. So I'm really glad I took it up, and I'm glad I still do it, particularly now where there's so much we can't control at the moment. The ability to stay calm, stay focused, control present, what you can, stay present is incredibly important.
Is it something that's in every club now? I mean, I was lucky enough to have Emma Murray on the show a couple of months ago, and it seems to be that pretty much every club is having almost someone full-time, if not part-time, in the club to work on mindfulness with the players. It's
certainly more mainstream, and I think if you look at the difference between corporate world and the footy world, the football clubs and sporting clubs do everything to be high performance. So they're always, because if you don't, you get the sack basically. So the importance of getting better over and over and over and over again. So I would say most clubs now would do it in some way, shape or form because, it works. It helps the players. There's so much data around, what it does to the brain and how it helps you sleep and build better relationships and be present and all those things that we've talked about.
Was there anything that you added to the toolkit in terms of mindfulness over the past 18 months since COVID's kind of stuffed up everything everywhere? Was there anything that you weren't doing before that you've adopted now into your morning or daily routine that you found has been a significant help, whether it might be journaling? I'm not sure if you're doing stuff like that before. Obviously, you're pretty active with the Momentum group and stuff like that. Is there anything in particular that you found has helped?
It's probably reinforcing. I mean, it was interesting when we did the Momentum course. I think some of that stuff you forget. The journaling I think is really important. The stacking, the habits. It's funny. I think we did one of them where you had to add something a week, and I was sort of sitting there going, my lifestyle's pretty good, and you're sort of racking your brain. And then I thought, well, if I do 20 push-ups and 20 sit-ups, and I multiply that by 356, actually that's a truckload of push-ups and sit-ups. But I think we don't look at it in that marginal gain, those incremental things.
Always looking for the
I think that's the problem with, as you would know,
yeah.
some of the problems with the fitness and health industry is all of a sudden you've got this person that's unhealthy and we try and jam this incredible diet down. I'm not suggesting it doesn't work, but it's so far away from the way they're eating anyway. So they're going to get through this 30-day diet and they're going to go, thank God I can have a frigging pizza now.
Yeah,
and I think, God, I can have 6 beers or something like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I try and coach with all of my clients, whether it be training or nutrition. I always say right from the start, like, all right, look, what on a good week or on a shit week, what can you do in terms of training, nutrition, whatever? So that's our baseline. Then we start to build on that. This week, all we're going to focus on is, all right, so you should eat this amount of protein. Doesn't matter. Anything else doesn't matter. The next week, we're going to add in water. Then we're going to add in how many calories you're having. Then we're going to add in, all right, how many workouts have you done this week? And then all of a sudden, there's been 8 weeks and it's a complete game changer. Whereas, like you said, a lot of the time people could try and go from 0 to 100 and expect it to happen straight away. And it's just not realistic. And as you've said, it's almost day one and they're counting down the days until it's over. Yeah.
And I think through the COVID, what it's reinforced is it's got to work for you. Mm-hmm. You've just articulated really well. Don't worry. I mean, we're competitive beasts and too often we compare ourselves to, why are they losing more weight than me or why are they running and, should I be doing that? No. Don't worry about them all the time. Yeah. Are you a better person today than you were yesterday? I think I am, because yesterday I didn't go for a walk. Today I've just started walking. I walked a K. Fantastic. What are you going to do tomorrow? You're not going to go 10K.
Yeah, exactly.
But can you do another K?
Yeah,
I reckon I can do another K.
Yeah.
So compare yourself to yourself and just get slightly better. So I think for me, COVID's really reinforced that. The Momentum course was fantastic. Had a lot of those tools, giving us tools. And I think that the other thing is, we've got to look after ourselves first and foremost. Yeah. If we can't look after ourselves, I talk about this, your own health will determine the health of your business. Yeah. So people that are, the conversation we're having now, when people get sort of half confused about why do I exercise, why do I eat well, why do I have to do this, why do I have to do that? It's like, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you look after yourself?
It's like that analogy of in the aeroplane, if you don't put your own oxygen mask on first, you can't help the person next to you anyway.
Well, we've got so conditioned now, and we probably don't get a start on this, but we've got so conditioned about a pill for this or a vaccine for this or, I mean, it's just bizarre that this notion of health is flipped so far the wrong way. It's just incredible.
And like you said, probably not a conversation for now, but I've said this a number of times to so many people. It's just interesting to me that since COVID first started, there's not been one government initiative around how can we, strengthen our immune system so we don't get it. All it is make sure we don't go anywhere near anyone else in case you get it. Even the fact that it's obviously been slightly better since the last lockdown, but the fact that gyms are one of the last things to open up, whereas, you can go to a strip club or a bloody brothel before you can go to the gym, it's just absurd.
And when you look at it in those terms, and you get back to leadership, I always think about what happens in that meeting. How in that meeting can someone what is the conversation in that meeting with that team that's making decisions that can come up with a decision like that? That's the thing that's probably most shocked me through COVID.
And touching on that, it almost seems like they don't at the start, there hasn't been any layout of what are our qualities or what do we see as our values.
No values.
There can't be any values.
No behaviours. No. And it's good. I always picture the meeting and the meeting's finished, and I think there was at one point, to your point, where you couldn't go to a gym, but you could go to a brothel or something like that, and there was a lot of posts on it.
Yeah.
I always sort of picture the meeting going, surely someone in the meeting goes, guys, can we just sit down for another 5 minutes? Yeah. Because we might need to go over this again.
Yeah.
Do you realise that we're now going to tell people you can't go to a gym, but you can go to a brothel? We might want to but there mustn't be anyone in the meeting that just has. And we talk about psychological safety. We talk about. I think it
also comes back to what you said before, though. It's those quote unquote leaders are thinking about their own benefit, their own votes from different people, and all that type of crap. And
they have no capacity to think outside their own themselves.
Yeah.
So they don't be able to stop. But also, I think they haven't created a psychological safe environment where the person that's sitting there thinking like you and I has the capacity to stand up and say, no, we shouldn't be doing that. Because it's a very top-down still approach, and it's a very bullying type scenario, et cetera, et cetera. So that person doesn't feel safe to speak up. So, of course, what happens, we go out, we stand there in front of everyone else, and the first thing people say is, how on earth did that get through?
Yeah.
But I think they're the things through COVID is, we have to get away from this notion of someone else or a pill or this or that, and through the momentum, through COVID, I realise my habits are really important, routines are really important, and just getting them done as best you possibly can.
Mate, before we wrap up, in regards to leadership by design, what's the target clientele? What is the process when you go into work with someone? And for those that are listening, is there anyone in particular that it's more targeted towards than others?
Not really. I mean, we sort of started the company about 4 years ago, and based on all our experience in corporate and in sport, so we really go into all sorts of companies, and depending on the size of the company, if it's a big company, we work on the exec team, the level below. If it's a smaller company, we love doing both. But the beauty of the smaller companies is working with all the teams, so they can create their own sort of culture code, their own behaviours, create environments. Really, we love going to all different types of companies, setting their culture code, redefining. If they do have a purpose and values, often it's something that someone else has given them, and a lot of times we'll ask them. I say, so look, do you want us to use it? Most of the time they say, no, maybe, but let's see what our staff thinks. And often we'll sort of change it based on that. So it's exciting and love doing it, and the change in the companies that we go into that are really committed to culture, they see an enormous change.
Brilliant. Lastly, mate, will we see you as a head coach again in the AFL?
No, not as a head coach. I've sort of had an involvement with North Melbourne this year, and got involved last year. Benny Buckley's a mate of mine, and originally it was to sort of help out Reece Shaw, and then Reece obviously had to leave due to mental health, and then I was on the board to appoint David Noble, and I've been with the club this year just doing some part-time work with the CEO, who's been terrific. Brady Rawlings, who's the GM, working a bit with their coterie groups as well, and doing a bit with Nobes and Johnny Blakey and the coaches and leadership group and players. So no, I've really enjoyed that. But if you're going to do it, you have to be full on and you have to be committed to it. And I can't see myself doing that again.
Well, Paul, thanks for joining us today, mate. It's been I really enjoyed the conversation, so I'm sure the listeners have taken a lot out of it as well, so thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
For everyone who's tuned into the episode, if you have enjoyed it, which I'm sure you have, we'd love for you to take a screenshot of this show at the moment and post it up on Instagram story for us. Tag myself, tag Paul. I'll have all the links to the Leadership by Design and your socials in the show notes, Paul. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll chat to you again in the next episode.